She was sitting on the floor, a strap around her neck, the other end tied to a door, 3 months pregnant, and the laundry was still going. You do not wash your baby's clothes on the morning you decide to die. You do not buy groceries. You do not leave the machine running for someone to come home to when you know no one is coming home. The medical examiner saw all of that and still called it a suicide. Someone else was in that apartment, and we know exactly who, because the cameras caught him leaving. Sandra Birch Moore was 23 years old, not just pregnant, excited. She had a name picked out. She had a crib coming. She had demands. Specific, fierce, uncompromising demands about who was going to be in her child's life. That fierceness, that refusal to be invisible. It may be the reason she is dead, because the man she was making demands of had been managing her since she was 15 years old, and he was very good at making problems disappear. The official story was simple. Troubled young woman, complicated pregnancy, made a terrible choice. Case closed, except inside Sandra's phone, investigators found 32,000 text messages, 32,000 with one man, a married man, a cop, a man who had been in Sandra's life since she was a child. And buried inside those messages was a detail so explosive it did not surface until after the arrest. We will get to that. But first you need to understand exactly how long this man had been in her life and what he had taken from her. Sandra was 15 years old the first time Matthew Farwell entered her life. He was a Stoughton police officer, 27 years old. According to the text messages Sandra kept, every single one of them, Farwell initiated a sexual relationship with her at that age. 27, a cop, 15, a child. Her family would later accuse him and 2 other officers of grooming her for years. The Stoughton Police Department ran an internal investigation. They agreed. By 2021, Sandra was 23 and pregnant, 3 months along. She believed Farwell was the father. She was not asking anymore. She was telling. His name on the birth certificate, his presence in the child's life, his accountability, finally, did for everything. Farwell was married, 2 kids at home, a 3rd baby on the way with his wife. He was running out of ways to say no. Sandra told friends he had turned violent. And then there was the footage. Matthew Farwell, his key, her apartment. He went in, he came out. Sandra did not. Every investigator who looked at this case looked at one person, Matthew Farwell, the relationship that began as a crime. The pregnancy he could not control. The 32,000 messages showing Sandra tightening the grip on everything he had built. His wife, his career, his freedom. Sandra had all of it in her hands. The federal government agreed and charged him with her murder. And then the Boston Globe published a story that made every assumption in this case collapse. New DNA testing. Matthew Farwell, the man Sandra told everyone had gotten her pregnant, is not the biological father of her baby. He believed he was. He was sitting in a federal holding cell, believing he was, until the DNA said otherwise. Where there is another man, no name, no charges, no scrutiny, a ghost in this case who may be the most important person in it. Here is what the prosecution will tell you. The DNA does not matter. Inside 32,000 text messages is the portrait of a man who spent years holding Sandra at arm's length and watching her refuse to stay there. She was not just asking him to step up, she was leveraging him. She knew about the abuse. She had the receipts, she had the timeline, and she was done being managed. Add the footage, add the key, add the timeline. The feds did not charge him on a hunch, but it did not end there. 2 things can be true. Farwell killed her, and the baby was never the real motive. Exposure was. A decade of abusing a minor, an affair destroying his marriage, a woman with 32,000 pieces of evidence and no intention of staying quiet. The prosecution does not need a paternity test to build that case. They never did, or Sandra found out. What if in those final days, Sandra discovered that the man she had been fighting for, the man she had been threatening, the man she had built her entire future around, was not even her baby's father? What does that do to someone who has already lost everything else? A defense attorney does not need the real killer. They need one jury member to imagine a different version of Sandra's last night. And right now, that version exists. The DNA was preserved at autopsy. The baby's sample was there from day one. So why, years later, are we only now finding out the father is not far well? What was everyone assuming? And what else got buried under those assumptions? Sandra Birch Moore was failed in nearly every direction. At 15 by a man who wore a badge and used it as cover. For years after by institutions that should have seen it and chose not to look. And in 2021, in her own apartment, one final time. Her family refused to accept the ruling. They hired lawyers, they made noise, they kept saying her name until the federal government had no choice but to listen. Sandra was getting ready for a baby, for a future, for the life she had decided she deserved. She was 23 years old, and she never got to find out if she was right.